Welcome back to Senior Savvy Cannabis. I'm Katherine Goldberg. Today, we're joined by Dr. Alisha Holloway, who is the Chief Science Officer at Phylos. Phylos works on cannabis genetics. So, Dr. Holloway, thank you so much for being with us. I am so excited to talk to you about the science of energizing weed.
Thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to be here. Always excited to talk about different kinds of cannabis and different cannabinoids.
I love it. So, before we jump into the conversation, can you just tell us what a chief science officer at a cannabis genetics company does? Like what in general, what kind of research do you do? What questions are you asking?
Right. So our company is focused on developing seed-grown cannabis. So we're really treating it like any other crop. You can think of tomatoes and the different varieties of tomatoes that you can get in the store that are seed-grown. And so we've put into place all of the different scientific pieces of the puzzle to develop seed-grown cannabis. We also have a second focus, which is on minor or rare cannabinoids, so things besides THC and CBD. You've probably heard of CBG and maybe THCV, which we'll talk a lot about today. And so, really, putting those pieces together involves having a very skilled, experienced breeding team that can develop the new varieties, having a laboratory that can process samples, tell us what kinds of cannabinoids, what kinds of terpenes or other secondary metabolites are in the plants, and then also having the capabilities to look at the genetic background of plants. So while we're breeding, we're using genetic markers and developing all the tools that are available in other crops on the genetic side. The final area is not really final, it's the discovery research side, and that's the team that develops the genetic markers. So putting all those pieces together in conjunction with a very skilled cultivation team is all the kind of science that we do.
I love it. I love it. And I have to tell the audience that I started using cannabis when I was 18, and that was when I took my first genetics class. And I remember thinking, if only we understood this plant's genome, maybe we could make energizing cannabis. Maybe I wouldn't fall asleep every time I used it. And I love how 18 years later, we're here to have that conversation. Before we get into, and we're going to focus on THCV and terpinolene, I think, for the conversation about what makes cannabis energizing.
Mhm.
But can we just take a step back once more? And can you tell us any like fun facts about the cannabis genome that might surprise someone who just smokes weed and likes it a lot?
Yeah, that's one thing that was really interesting when I got into cannabis a little over 10 years ago is that we were just starting to even sequence the genome of cannabis. So, it's like, what, 15 years behind the human genome as far as really being able to see the order and orientation of what all is in there. The cannabis genome is about a little less than a third the size of the human genome. It's a little bit easier to work with because it's a little bit smaller. Um, I am grateful for all of the folks that were willing to keep cannabis alive during the long years, decades of prohibition, because we have a lot of genetic variation in cannabis to work with.
Hmm.
And that means that there's the possibility to breed cannabis with a whole different sets of traits, whether you want them to be tall or short or bushy or narrow, have good fiber qualities, or make 30% of their plant biomass in cannabinoids. So that diversity is something that we learned about pretty early on in the foundational work that we were doing in the genetics of cannabis. So those
Amazing.
are some of the kind of interesting things. The other interesting thing is that cannabis is just like humans. They have X and Y chromosomes. So the way that sex is determined is the same as, or similar at least, with sex chromosomes, just like humans, where you have XX is female and XY is male. So that is rare in plants, surprisingly, not rare in animals, but is really rare in plants and makes for some interesting genetic work that we can do.
I love it. I love it. And if you guys are new, you'll pick up quickly that I feel like the more we understand about the plant, the better off we are. The better decisions we can make about how we want to use it and which kind we want to use. And the more we can educate people about the benefits of cannabis, whether that is to deal with stress and pain or if it's to deal with increasing energy, and helping people lose weight. So let's get into my favorite minor cannabinoid, um, THCV. THCV is a hard one to find in the shops, but I live in California. I keep my ear to the ground, and some
Mhm.
people are growing high THCV flower. Can you tell us about what makes THCV different than, let's say, THC or CBD, and kind of the work that you guys have done around it?
I love THCV too. Um, and so I'm always really excited to talk about it because I think it's a great story from a lot of different perspectives, the genetic perspective, breeding, and then, of course, for the end uses of cannabis. And we've spent a lot of time and energy developing THCV varieties. And THCV is really interesting because you do see in the literature that it has these energizing effects. And so we were very interested in bringing products to market that could be more on, quote, the sativa side. So these uplifting, energizing, not the couch lock kinds of cannabis, which also have their uses, of course. And so we started looking into finding genetics that had THCV, and we got really lucky. We just had happened to have some germplasm that had THCV, and then we, in-licensed different varieties and learned about how THCV is made in the plant. And it's combining those two pieces together, so how it's made and then having the potential in the plants that allowed us to do the breeding for higher levels of THCV. So just to back up a little bit, THCV is very much, the molecule looks almost exactly like THC. It just has this little carbon chain on the end of the molecules that's a little bit shorter in THCV than it is THC. So it's 3 carbons in THCV and it's 5 carbons in THC. And that small change makes a huge difference in the way that it interacts in the body. So when you think about THC, it is binding to and activating what's called the CB1 receptor. And that's how you're getting a lot of the effects of THC being intoxicating and having other effects. So THCV has this shorter tail on the end, and it can still bind the receptor, but it doesn't quite activate it, except maybe at really, really high levels. And so you're getting a very different effect from it. Um, when we were looking at the molecules, we were trying to understand how you would get a plant to make one versus the other. And so we, in our discovery science team, we identified in the pathway of making these cannabinoids that it was really early in the pathway that you have this precursor that is either able to make THC or THCV.
One
And
or
so
the
we
other.
identify, yeah, one or the other. So it starts from a very early stage with the precursor. And then what's interesting is that it all goes through the same cannabinoid production pathway. So everything after that is the same.
Hmm.
So you think of the final enzymes that make THC or CBD, and that's the same enzyme. It's just starting with a different precursor. So we found genetic markers that allowed us to understand whether a plant was going to make THC or THCV. And then we used that in our breeding program to take these kind of not pretty landracey looking, maybe 4% THCV plants and combine them in ways that allowed us to get up to 20% THCV. So it's been incredible. We've developed, oh, there we got a little friend with
Hi,
us.
friend. We love the pets. We love the pets the most, as long as they have access to the cannabis they need.
Yes, yes. And so we have developed a suite of plants that have from kind of a one-to-one ratio of
Hmm.
THC and THCV all the way up to about a 5-to-1 ratio of THCV to THC. So you're getting all of that energizing THCV cannabinoid and then still a little bit of the THC.
This is my dream come true. I feel like I can just like die happy now. That's all I wanted. That's Thank you. Thanks for making my dreams come true.
Awesome.
Um, so in this suite of plants, you're controlling for THCV. You have the THC under control as well. Are terpenes part of the conversation at this level or no?
We have
Yeah, how do you even think about how do you even think about terpenes in relation to these modified plants that are a little bit more unusual?
Right. We have not done a ton of work on the aromas of which really is what you're getting at with the terpenes and other secondary metabolites that create aroma. We haven't had a huge focus on bringing in, for example, terpinolene into the THCV plants, but they do have some, and they do have a really nice aroma. It's really like fruity and uplifting kind of aroma. In some of our THC varieties, we've focused more on bringing things like terpinolene in to the seed grown THC side of the business. And a lot of our customers and people giving us experience notes are really saying that terpinolene is or the varieties that we have that are terpinolene dominant are
Mhm.
uplifting. And so that's a focus for some of our work.
I love it. Just to understand the science, you broke down so clearly the kind of the pathways that THC or THCV will come down. Do, where do terpenes come from?
Yeah, they come from a similar pathway, and we have done some work to understand how different terpenes are made, and if we can select for plants that have different components. Our discovery research team has identified markers for 13 of the common um, terpenes that are in cannabis, and we've used those, particularly the terpinolene marker, to select for plants that will make higher levels of terpinolene. But then there's also things like linalool and humulene and just a
The rest of
variety.
them. Yeah. Yeah. If we could just get a little bit less myrcene,
Yeah.
I would be happy because I am very sensitive to, I think, the GABA system. So when the
Hmm.
brake turns on, when I use anything with myrcene in it, I am just flat affect. No one's going to the gym, not the best version of myself. Um,
Yeah. That's one thing that's a little bit unfortunate in the cannabis industry is that um, everyone wants a big aroma, which I completely understand. But a lot of states don't have the deli style model that we have in Oregon, where you can go into the dispensary and you can smell something. You can like
the nose
physically
knows. You let,
smell and understand the flower that you're going to buy. And so they're in packages that you can't really
mm,
see the flower. You certainly can't smell it. And so people are going by numbers. And
mhm.
so they're using percent of terpenes to indicate whether something is going to have, quote, a loud aroma or is going to have a nice aroma. And terpenes don't tell the whole story. And in fact, some of them at high levels are unpleasant. And myrcene being one of them. So the fact that myrcene is dominant in a lot of varieties, and we're using these numbers to judge good versus bad, am I going to buy this? It tends to it tends to make selection for myrcene even more predominant in the industry. And so we've done some work to identify genetic markers for not having myrcene, which sounds kind of weird. It's kind of like the opposite. And we've tried to select against having that as a dominant terpene in favor of a combination of other terpenes. And I'm spending a lot of time talking about terpenes, and I mentioned they're not the whole story. I mean, you've got esters, you've got these volatile sulfur compounds that are at really low levels but they're really important in making the aromas in cannabis. So it's kind of complicated. You've got, can you smell it, kind of the odor threshold, and that varies a lot depending on the metabolite. And then, you've got the levels. And so it's a kind of complicated picture of how we actually get to different effects based on things besides the cannabinoids.
I love it. Um, this is fantastic. I am so content. I've never been this content in my life. Um, I want to ask two questions. One is random and one is going to be more specific. The specific one is I want to know about the clinical trials that you guys have conducted
Mhm.
and what you have looked at and what you have noticed. Because of course cannabis is so subjective. So I feel like when we combine subjective experience with clinical data, we're at kind of the meat of what we're talking about. The random question that just popped into my head is who are your customers? Not from like a financial perspective or anything like that, but it seems like if we have people listening right now who are like, sign me up, like can I grow this kind of cannabis? Are you more serving the industry more so at this point than serving the customer? But hopefully, as you serve the industry, the customer will have better products to choose from in the near future. Is that accurate to say?
Right. So are we are mostly working with either single state operators or multi-state operators in the industry, and their cultivators are choosing to grow our genetics. And then we do have some ability to work with directly with consumers through third-party seed sellers. And so, we definitely want to service the breadth of the industry and get good material out to everyone from home growers to, you know, people making pharmaceutical ingredients. So,
I
yeah, that's
appreciate the explanation.
the goal. Yeah.
And fabulous. Okay. And let's just end on the clinical research that you
Mm,
guys have conducted. I'm curious how clinical research is collected in the first place
right.
and kind of how it's analyzed and what you've learned.
Yeah. So we wanted to have the ability to make claims about the effects of THCV. And so we realized that we would need to do some clinical trial work to be able to make those claims. There was not a lot out there at the time. Since then, there has been some more work showing that the appetite suppressing effects of THCV, another study looking at intoxication, showing that it's not intoxicating unless you take a massive whopping dose. And so what we did is to look at products that could go into the hands of consumers. So we made gummies with THC only. We made gummies with about 2 to 1 THCV to THC. And then we also compared that to a placebo gummy. And what's interesting, I think there's a movement towards distributed clinical trials so that you can impact a larger population. You can be in any place and use your phone to record data from, taking a gummy. And so we went that route. We worked with People Science, who have decades of experience. The founders have decades of experience with clinical trials, and were really helpful in helping us to set up this particular trial for THCV. So what we did is we gave participants all three gummy types. They were blinded, so they were labeled ABC. Um, and we had them take at least three of one type of gummy, and then they switched over and took the other types. So they would be in one treatment, and then they would cross over to the other treatment, cross over to the other treatment. And all of that was blinded and randomized. And we asked a lot of questions about appetite and about energy and motivation and focus and things like that. And we had some maybe not surprising findings at this point, but what we saw is that when you looked at the THCV plus THC gummy, we did not see the elevated like munchies and appetite that you see often when you have THC. And so some further clinical trials have shown that the actual appetite suppressing effect of THCV, but what we were able to show is that at least you didn't get the munchies if you had THCV on board. And so that was really positive. The other thing is that we saw that there was a reduction or practically no report of fatigue. And
Hmm.
when you looked at the THC gummy and the placebo gummy, we had reports of fatigue. I mean, people are just worn out, they're tired. But then when they had the THCV plus THC gummy, it was almost none. It was really surprising, a very strong effect. And so that I think goes towards the idea that it is more energizing and you don't get the couch lock kind of situation, even when you have THC on board, as long as you've got the THCV. So that was pretty exciting.
I love it. I'm just so thrilled to show this other side of weed. I feel like, through popular culture and the narrative, there's kind of this stoner mentality, sitting on a couch lock, not being able to get up. And
Right.
it doesn't have to be like that. What you're describing is, in fact, the exact opposite. And just a personal anecdote, a friend of mine was going through like a weight loss journey and
Hmm.
used THCV and I believe humulene.
Hmm.
I seem to pronounce all of them wrong, but I think it's called humulene. And she was able to lose nearly 200 pounds. And of course,
Wow.
there were other lifestyle changes, but she credits the cannabis to the weight loss being effective and not as hard as she thought it was going to be. So, when we're in this age of Ozempic,
Hmm.
which I'm sure has merit for a lot of reasons and a lot of people, it's cool to know that there's a natural alternative.
That's right. And then, a lot of people are using THC for pain relief and ooh, could go into a whole thing on pain relief and cannabinoids.
Come
But they're
back.
using THC for pain relief, but they don't want to feel, groggy and fatigued and so having THCV in concert with that will still give you the pain relief, but, kind of mitigate those other more adverse effects.
Not everyone wants to feel stoned. They want the benefits of cannabis. They want it to work for their lifestyle and they want to participate in their life. So
Yeah.
I'm I'm blown away. This is by far my favorite interview I've ever done. And if you
Oh,
need
thank you.
like a lab mascot or like a poster child, you know,
Yes.
I can come. Just joking.
Come see us.
Okay, yeah, I'll never leave. So this was absolutely enlightening because there are still people who leave comments on my videos saying that there's no such thing as energizing weed. So I stopped responding at some point because I was like, I can't explain the science if you don't want to listen. So I think enough people have figured it out, and there are enough of us who want to see this in the shops. We don't want to have to rely on the gray market. We want to be able to get these products that are tested, that are safe.
Hmm.
And it sounds like that's exactly what you're setting the stage for. So I would love to have you back. Maybe we can talk about pain next time or anything else you'd like. But I found this absolutely enlightening. So I'm so thankful for your ability to not only conduct science, but to explain the science to the rest of us. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Well, thank you. It's always such a pleasure to talk about this work. You know, it's